Hello, world. Hello, universe. Hello, everybody out there listening. Thank you. This is the 81st, 81 over episode of the Real Resilience Talk podcast. I'm still Cam, and we are still inspired by and empowered by our First Amendment. So we defend it, we're going to expend it. But today, ladies and gentlemen, I have an amazing guest on the show today, a man I've been corresponding with for quite a few months now. An Army veteran, a leader in the community, a man making differences, and he's going to explain to us a few things that we might need to know. So make sure you take heed to listen to this warrior and his story and his guidance, and maybe we'll be made better, because that's the whole goal of this show, is to make people better, stay upstream and stay left of bang, because sometimes get hard, they do, but we need some resilience. So with that said, everybody, welcome Mr. Raymond to our show today. Yeah! How are you, sir? How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. Before we recorded, I'll get the words out.
I love it.
We were talking about a lot of things that even though we probably come from different backgrounds and different experiences, when you're in the military, for me, it was a life-changing experience.
Yes.
Really life-changing. And it helped me to relate to people better than I ever would have had I not done it. Fortunately, we're talking about, jump school, that, we both made it, our service experience out alive and, reasonably.
That's right. Yeah.
But the mental experiences and the emotional experiences, at least for me, have never left me. It gave me, thank you, the taxpayer, for paying me.
Amen.
In order for this experience, I survived. And what I'm really pleased about is I was intelligent enough, and we can define intelligence, but I was intelligent, or maybe not use intelligence. How about I was astute enough, and curious enough, and observant enough to benefit from the experience that I went through.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I got to say that too. Thank you, all the taxpayers, for the education I received. Education comes in many, many forms. It's not just scholastic. So thank you. And I hope I was an astute student as you were, Mr. Raymond. But
well, I'll tell you where actually, it made the difference. See, I'm not athletic. I mean, I may look like, well, actually, I'll tell you a quick story. Well, let me just explain. I'm not athletic. I'm studious. I'm curious. So there are people that actually helped me through the
that's right.
Through the the PT and all the other things. I was just I was not good at throwing grenades, and I was not good at the handlebars. I just don't know how to do it that well. However, they helped me in that, and I helped them, with the how to think.
Yes.
How to do things. Well, actually, even some of the basic things, how to make a bed. I mean, believe it or not, I was at a conference in Washington, D.C., and I was sitting at the bar, and then there was this military person, and I was telling him about, my experiences. He looks at me, he says, "You just don't look military enough." And I said, or you just look like the type. And I thought, what's the type? I mean,
Amen.
Because I didn't have tattoos, or I didn't, I think what he was saying is I didn't look the warrior part. I hadn't thought about it, but he didn't think I looked like a warrior.
Yeah, he probably doesn't know anything about the real culture of the armed services, because I'll tell you right now, some of the most ferocious, vicious, amazing warriors I ever met when my time in service and being around all the branches were people that did not look the stereotype, were people that were sometimes quiet, reserved, that were studious, or that just didn't fit this general stereotype. And the ones who did fit the stereotype were some of the worst leaders, some of the worst followers, some of the most non-tactical or practical people in the world, but they talked a good game. And when they were sitting at a bar, I'm sure they really wanted to be a service member then. But we needed them to be a service member when they were actually at the unit on a day-to-day. That's when we needed them, not at the military birthday ball, not at Toys for Tots. We need you to be one when you're at work. So some of the most effective warriors I ever met were nowhere near the stereotype. So there's that.
Well, to summarize, really what I think you're saying is there are people that show up, and then there are people that participate. I
That's
like
right.
people that participate. I mean, do you know the most decorated soldier of World War II? The most decorated
Audie Murphy?
That's right. That's right. And he was 5'2", 5'3", didn't look the warrior part.
That's right.
But he but he participated. Simon Sinek, I don't know if you know him,
Yes.
and he talks, he does consulting. I'm not sure in what with the Navy SEALs,
Yes.
and but he was telling the story of what makes him, how do you get through Bud School? And what he said is, it wasn't the people that were the best athletes.
That's right.
It was the people that knew how to participate, and they knew how to cooperate. And I think what he's saying is that they had endurance. You got to you
Yes.
got to work. You got to endure. It's like going to school. I wasn't a natural student, but I endured because I said, I think it's worthwhile, so I'll endure it, and maybe I'll learn to love it.
That's right.
So whether he's right or not, I never went through Ranger School. I never went through Delta Force. I couldn't have made it through Delta Force. I mean, that's a whole level of thinking, and probably I wouldn't, because of physical thing. I probably wouldn't have made it, even if I wanted the endurance. I don't think I could have done it. But it'd been interesting to try.
I'm in the same category, sir. I'm in the same exact category. And there's many people probably listening right now to my voice saying it, and they're going, yeah, Cam would have never made it neither. But you know who did? And there's a reason why they casted Chuck Norris in that movie. So I'm just saying, I'm not Chuck Norris level, but there's a reason why he is.
Here's the difference, Cam. I think I'm just giving you old opinion because I'm
I
old.
love it. No, I love it.
You don't know unless you try. I mean, I've
Amen.
tried things, and every once in a while I say, gee, I didn't know I could do that. Amazing. Or I listened to somebody, or somebody helped me through it, and I said, hey, I've said I can do this. I didn't think I could. And then, sometimes I've done things, where I'll say, no, this isn't working for me. But you never know till you try. I mean, there's some things. I mean, I'll give you an example. So I am not going to try bungee jumping. I like it and survive. I'm just never going to do bungee jumping.
I'm with you, and I love that outlook, especially the emphasis on the endurance and the you don't know until you try. You don't know. I talked to a lot of people about just using art therapy as a way to express things. I've said it before, stand-up comedy has saved my life, and you don't know you even enjoy something until you try it. So there's a lot of people who are like, I could never do this, I could never do that, or I don't like that. And it's like, did you try it yet? Like, because if you like bowling, the only reason why you know you like it is because you tried it, or it became a healthy outlet for you, or the same with anything else.
I like bowling.
I'm just saying, that's my example to people, you know what I mean? And then there's the other side of it too, where people don't know what they don't know. So there's a lot of untapped potential in a lot of us as human beings, because either A, we don't know about it, or B, we do know about it and we're not willing to try. So y'all take heed to that. If you're sitting on something right now out there, listener, and you're like, I always thought about fill in the blank, just do it. Like, just Nike it, right? Just try it and see if you actually give it a shot and try it. And if it's like anything else in life, it may take a few listens. There's a few songs that I love that are in my favorite song library that the first time I heard them, I was like, but then it grows on you. Or the first time you work out after not working out for a while, you're pretty sore and you're like, ew. But then after about 2 weeks or so, you're like, hey, start feeling a little bit of strength, start feeling a little better. And then you start seeing the results, and then you're hooked. And then you're like, now I like the gym, or fill in the blank, running, or whatever the thing may be. But I think it's imperative, especially for us as veterans, that we need to try new things, and we need to have open minds and open hearts, because it could be the healthy outlets that channel us, or we channel our negative into that outlet, vice, trying to find it in a bottle or in the bottom of a bag of some sort, or we just become doped up and just zombies for the rest of our lives, or we just get down and depressed and we're not around anymore. So I think it's imperative to do what Mr. Raymond just said, which is you don't know until you try. So that's my little PSA right there.
Well, it's also part of the PSA. One of the things about being in the military, I'm an outlier. And what I mean by that is I've been organized from babyhood. There was never a time I had clothes on the floor or that I wasn't organized. In the military, they will teach you how to be organized. And if you don't think that they will teach you how to organize, they know how to do this.
That's right.
They've had hundreds of years of experience how to do it. And if you don't know how, and if you're ornery about it, they have ways to make you part of the system. But if you get the plot of
That's
being
right.
organized, it will help you in life, in anything you do. And I'll give you, I didn't have that issue. A lot of people did, but
Mm.
if they got the plot of how to be organized, it will help them in their lives. But I'll give you an example that how the military has figured this out, because you could say in the military there are a lot of dumb things they do, or there are a lot of things that don't make sense, and it's true. And everybody in this military has a story about how stupid
For sure.
situation. But the overall thing is there really is a plot to it. There really is a meaning. There is a reason for it. But if you, what I was thinking about is in the United States military academies, they have this plan of how they do it, and it seems awful. But they start off with, you're a plebe. There's a reason for it, is to say you are going to become an officer in the military, and there are ways of how they will train you. Not just, when they say discipline, what they really mean, I think, is how to be organized, how to listen, how to think, how to follow.
Mhm.
The first year or two, you got to learn how to follow before you can tell somebody else, and they will teach you. They will teach you that. If you learn that, if you get the idea, it will help you in life. Because if you can't be organized, how can you ask other people to do something that you can't or won't do?
Amen. Yes, yes. Yeah, we can't have we have enough hypocritical people in our lives and stuff like that. And when you're in leadership and you have lives at stake, it's imperative that you understand how to follow and that you understand how to lead by example. That doesn't mean be perfect, but that the fact that you are willing to humble yourself to conform to what is expected of you, so you can expect that of them. And what I heard, a little mantra, a leader of mine, a mentor of mine, a friend of mine, Pat, used to always say, he said, inspect what you expect.
Well,
And it just matters. But if you aren't living up to the expectation, then how are you to inspect?
exactly. And depending on what you're doing, in the military, it's life and death. At least, things like it is life and death. However, one of the things I've come to respect, people will say, well, I'm in, I mean, in this culture, even the elected officials say, I was in the Rangers, and I was in the SEALs, and I was in, they all want to say I was in special ops. However, what I really admire are the support people.
Amen.
I can't do anything. Nothing can be done unless you have the support system. They are vital too. They're not always your most rugged. If they're not organized and they're not helping me, I'm in deep, I'm in deep trouble.
That's
So
true.
I've learned in time, and also admire people that they're not as rugged, or they're not as athletic, but they're doing a lot. They can do a lot of things that can help make your life a lot better, or they can keep you alive.
It's so true, especially when we have our own little like ecosystem of how we handle everything. And, in the Marine Corps, it's every Marine's a rifleman. And I know, because I know friends in the Army and other branches where they went to serve as truck driver, or they went to serve as supply or admin in theater, and they were tasked and asked to go on patrol and to go outside the wire and to actually be security for convoys. I was in Iraq with members of the band, were augments, and some of them were
So they were tuned up, huh?
they literally,
And the
that's,
tuned up
yeah.
humor. The
They
band tuned
they
up.
were so tuned up. That's right. They were tuned. They were on tune. They were hitting. They were killing notes.
I like that, killing notes. All right,
They were killing
I was gonna
notes.
go there. Thank you, Cam.
I love it. I love it. Nah, it's true. So you just don't never know what is the potential of somebody, or what the mission at the task at hand may pull out of somebody. So don't always judge people on their MOSs or what their actual assigned specialty is, because I know some straight up warriors who will kick in a door and clear a room and save some people and do a humanitarian mission all at the same time. And they're admin, or their supply, or they are, or like, I was a communicator, I was a radio operator, and we used to always say, you can talk about us, but you can't talk without us. I know some radio operators that are immaculate warriors and can go toe to toe, blow for blow with anybody in any kind of specialty of any type of tactical, straight on kinetic MOSs. And they fit in just as well. So it's a lot of hoopla, and to each their own. I think the ones who really know the difference of what it actually takes, they're not ones that will tell you what they are. They'll show you what they are. And some of them are not the stereotypical, 5'10" strong state trooper looking person, right? It's 5'3". Some women that were very, very short were some of the most ferocious lionesses in combat and warriors on convoys, and actually perished and gave the ultimate sacrifice, but they were just as effective as the 6'2" football player, Ohio State, whatever fill in the blank stereotype. No, it's just about being a warrior, and that's a spirit that we carry. And you just never know what somebody's capable of until they're in that situation.
Exactly. I was reading about that there are a lot of people that have won the Congressional Medal of Honor that just don't look, as you say, the warrior type. But at that moment, they had something what was in them that said, this is what they're going to do. And they asked them, said, why'd you do it? I said, well, I did it because I had to do it, or I had to save people.
That's right.
And so, as you say, it's not what you look like. As you say, it's what you do.
That's what you do.
Something just, I mean, there are a lot of movies about that. People say, why'd you do that? I was angry, or I just needed to be done. And,
Yes.
it's like, you've read the story of a child is trapped behind a car, under a car, and
Yes.
the woman, picks the car. How'd you do it? I had to save my child. I mean, it's just people can do extraordinary things if put in a certain situation.
It is. It is. And the willingness to be put in the situation says it all. So to me, if you're a veteran out there and you served 2 years or 4 years or 40 years, all of us signed a blank check to give our life to a cause. And sadly, some of our brothers and sisters are no longer with us, but all of us were willing to serve. We're willing to give the ultimate sacrifice, and that is to be honored. So if you're out there and you're like, well, I didn't go to Iraq, and I didn't go to Afghanistan, and I didn't go to World War II, and I didn't be in Vietnam. Hey, don't compare. You're just as much a warrior as anyone else. Your time will come, or blessedly, it didn't, because I pray for peace. Be ready for war, but I pray for peace. And anybody who really knows war knows that really nobody wins in the end. And it's a toll that we pay for the rest of our lives. And I know people that are not geographically located there, but every day they're still in Iraq or Afghanistan. So don't chase the clout or what Hollywood tries to depict. Obviously, we're ready for that. We're ready to put our lives on the line. But more times than not, we're not fighting to kill an enemy. We're not fighting for a politician or a policy. We're fighting to keep our brother and sister to our left and right alive. That's usually what we do when we go over places. Don't sell yourself short. You signed the line, then you're a veteran, and you deserve the thank you for your service just like anyone else. Anyone.
Amen.
I see a lot of our veterans, though, a lot of them, they're like, well, I was in during, after Gulf War, before GWAT, or I was in during the 80s. It wasn't the same. No. You served and you were willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice. So all I say is thank you for your service, and you're just as much of a veteran as anyone else. Comparison's a thief of joy, but it's also the thief of healing. So that's my thoughts on that. But I do want to gain your thoughts on something, Mr. Raymond. The subject of resilience. I think we've kind of hinted around it the whole time, but how would you define it, Mr. Raymond?
God, I haven't been asked that question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that question about resilience. Let me think about this. Because I mean, I've always had to be resilient, because sometimes I need. Well, let me ask you this: how do you define resilience? What do you mean by resilience? Give me an example of resilience, so that maybe that'll help me to give you a better answer than.
Yeah, no, thank you. So to me, I mean, and everyone has their own kind of definition of it. We can go to Merriam-Webster's and there's a scientific definition of it, and some people even argue using it as a definition to define, perseverance as we use it in a lot of common terms. But I do think resilience is the difference between a lot of things, and others keep going. But for me, I say it is the ability to adapt, the willingness to adapt, and the willingness to keep moving forward. And I think a song that says it best is from Sam Cooke, somebody who died way too soon, but a great artist. He has that song, Keep Moving On. And it's just that. It's just how do we keep moving on? But some of that sometimes is how do we adapt to the situation at hand? And another one I like to say is basically what Bruce Lee defined with be water, my friend. That to me is resilience, because that water, it's carved out all of our major landscapes in the world today. More times than not, water, it persists. It doesn't give up. It just keeps on flowing. It will keep going through and penetrating over a rock for thousands of years until that rock conforms to it. And sometimes it's delicate and sometimes it's ferocious, but it's water and it just keeps on going. That's for me, but everyone usually has a different definition.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, I could talk about lifetime then of resilience. I mean, I wasn't a in high school. I was an okay average student, and but I had the resilience to graduate.
Yes.
But an interesting story. My father was in World War II. He was in the China, Burma, India theater, and he had actually already been a college graduate and was in the Army Air Force. And so, I sort of had that, sort of military culture. And so when I graduated, the only time, and I was in the just I don't know, a couple weeks from graduation, and I had already signed up to join the military. There's a requirement you had to go see the guidance counselor. So he looks at my grades and says, "You're not college material." I said, "You're right." And he said, "Well, you should do something else." I said, "You're right." And I said, I'm joining the military. Can I leave now?" I mean, he wasn't really going to offer me any, interesting ideas. The point is, I already had a plan. So in that way, if he was going to think I wasn't going to be resilient or think about it, he was just looking at documents. He didn't ask. I don't think he asked me any questions of any that I can remember. It was just, in essence, what he was saying is, "You're a failure," or
Mm.
"You're just going to do this." And I said, "You're right." But so I joined. So I joined the service. And, I do have the intellectual capability. It's just, sort of the high school circumstance. But I read books while I was in the military. I took classes and I had my challenges, but I was resilient. I mean, I had difficulty in basic training. I wasn't good at throwing grenades, but I was, resilient. I figured out how to do it, and running and jumping and, doing things that were other people were more capable. No, and I just wasn't good at it, but I was good at a lot of other things. But I made it through basic training, and then went through infantry school, and I made it through that, and then I went to jump school, and I made it through that. Why? Either I was stupid, or just or I just didn't take no for an answer, or failure was not an option, whatever it was. And then when I got out of the service, I went to a community college in Woodland Hills to learn how to get back to be a student. Anybody that has an opinion about community college, like, you didn't go to a 4-year college. Well, I went to a 4-year college, but before that, I went to a community college. It's great experience. In fact, the statistics will show people that go to community college actually do better academically than those that started off as freshmen in a 4-year. And I did, I really thrived at community college. I really did. And then I thrived at USC and University of Southern California, not University of South Carolina. And I thrived there. And I was resilient. I learned how to do things, or I took courses where it was a struggle. I really had to struggle at it, but I was resilient, and somehow I passed, and then moved on. So the point of the story, the guidance counselor was wrong, because he had no empathy. He didn't ask me anything. But I had a plan. But I had a plan. I've always had a plan. Sometimes the plan works. Sometimes it needs to be altered. Sometimes, or as I say to people now, because I've been married a long time, I will come up with, I think, the most brilliant idea. I mean, it is just a wonderful idea. And then I'll go over it with my wife, and I'll say, "Here's what I'm thinking." Now, it'll go either two ways. She'll either say, "This is the stupidest thing," or she might say, "Well, have you considered this? Have you
Hmm.
considered that?" Now, this is where she is platinum class, because then I can say two things. "I never thought about it that way," or, "Now I understand what this is about." Point is, she'll help me put things in perspective.
Yes.
Marriage is a form of resilience,
Ooh, yes, it is.
because if you can't, if in some ways marriage is like a business. It's a tough business.
Hmm.
But in a relationship, if you really want it to last and the people matter, I think it's being resilient. You got to be resilient. You got to listen. You're going to make mistakes. They're going to be mad at you. You're going to be mad at them. But you have to be resilient to say, "I want to make this work. What do we need to do to make this work?" And what I mean by work is, how can we be happy about it, not just endure, just tolerate? How can we make this work where it gives meaning to our lives, that we're happy? If you go through your life and you're unhappy and you're miserable and you're unpleasant, you miss the plot.
Yes.
That doesn't mean, look, do I get upset? Do I lose my temper? Do I, are my endorphins confused? Is my amygdala messed up? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Actually, it happened this morning because I had to wait too long at the eye doctor.
Yes. Well, that was definitely that was a reason for it
Look,
right there.
it wasn't where I'll tell you where I lose my resilience and my enthusiasm is you're in a commercial area and you're driving through and somebody comes out and you're driving and then they decide they're going to move, they're going to move in front of you. My appetite for, and it was, I'm not happy about it because they make me afraid. And so I don't like to be afraid. And I don't like to be surprised. I'll say it another way: rather than be afraid, I don't. And I feel this way, and I talk to people about this with long-term care benefits. Is that the three things that people really don't like to be, if in their lives? One, people don't like to feel invisible.
Hmm.
Second, people want attention. Everybody, even if you're a loner, even if whatever it is, everybody needs and wants some level of attention. And the third thing is people don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't care in any culture. I don't care how learned you are. I don't care how fluent. Nobody wants to feel vulnerable. And so, you can be resilient if you learn to overcome those things of, how can I get people to do things for me that will help me. But I'll guarantee you that if you're not polite to people, if you're not pleasant to people, they may have to do something. But if they have a way that they can make your life unpleasant, they will do it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. No. Wow. I mean, and congrats to have a platinum class wife. That was beautiful said. That was so well said. And to always have a plan. And I couldn't agree more with you that people do not want to feel like that they don't have any attention, that they don't matter, that they feel invisible. And then when you say feeling vulnerable, what I took it to mean, because there is strength in being vulnerable and sharing yourself, but what I took it to mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, was to feel unsafe, right?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, to feel unsafe. I am that will, what you said earlier, the amygdala, that will trigger some flight, freeze, fawn real quick, and especially in veterans, because we did have that life or death like outline to everything that we did while in service. But when we feel unsafe, or that we're not relevant, or that people don't care about us, woo, that's a little equation for bad math right there.
Well, they also the other thing in this service, they make, especially in basic training or certain schools, they make you afraid, so you learn how not to be afraid, not to feel vulnerable. In other words, you learn how to adapt. You learn how to deal with it. And I'll give you an example. When you have emergency services that come, and we've had emergency services come to our house a number of times. They are trained. They take continuing education. They know about a lot of situations, and usually, most situations there is a problem. Emergency services don't show up looking for the dental plan. They're looking because there's a problem.
Hmm.
They've rehearsed this where they learn how to be calm. They learn how to ask questions. They learn how to deal with in a stressful situation, and that's a valuable skill to have. Because look, I don't want emergency skills coming to say, "Let me look at YouTube or AI."
So true. So true. Yeah. No, it does. It puts you in those uncomfortable positions so you can develop that grit and that resilience to be able to, like, I think Jocko, famous Navy SEAL, talks about like calm is contagious, and then being able to be the calm in the storm, especially as a leader, to be able, and that's what that person is in that situation. They're there to triage, to identify the most bleeding they can, stop that bleeding, and then provide care and aid. But they're not going to come up like frantic with you and be a fellow commiserator. They're trying to get to the end state, which is to save lives. And that's such a skill in life. But I think and to all the veterans out there listening, I talk a lot about mental health and sharing things and being vulnerable and don't suppress it, but express it. But I want to say also to all the warriors who are currently in operation, in units, there is a time and place to compartmentalize. There is a time and a place to suppress, because you have to focus on the task in hand. But here's where we mess up, because we're humans, is that we continue to apply that same metric, that same filter, that same initiative to all things in life. And it's like, actually, no, there's a time to decompress, and there's a time to be vulnerable and to share and potentially seek help or medicine or whatever the thing may be. but we get stuck in it, and then we just feel like we can't share. We have to compartmentalize everything all the time, and that is not what anyone is saying. But there is a time, and I think that's where we're having a lot of friction right now with some people, not all, but to where they are like, I'm just not happy today. I can't go on this mission. And it's like, oh, no, no, no. You're misinterpreting the whole logic of what we're trying to say here, is that we shouldn't stuff it all in and suppress it forever. But there's a time and a place to not be vulnerable. And there's a time and a place to focus, like you said, those EMS workers and staff that come out. They don't have any time. There's no moment right there to be like, I'm just feeling down. No, no, no. You need to save lives right now. That's what you need to do. I think sometimes we overcorrect, or we throw the baby out with the bathwater with one initiative or the other, and then we're just not effective. And that's the last place any of us want to be, is to be not effective in life. And we do walk around miserable because, we overcorrected or took it too far. Well, we do that as service members, don't we?
Well, if somebody has gone through, police departments, or if you've gone through a major event, you've shot somebody shot at you, they take you off, call offline, they deactivate you. And they'll do that for airline pilots.
Yeah.
Because you've been through trauma.
That's right.
They want, they want to work with you to know, that you're okay. Just to say you're okay. You're not okay. It's like, if I step on your, and I can say I apologize, but somebody was, does it hurt? Yeah, it hurts. It's okay to say, yeah, it hurt, rather than are you okay? No, I'm not okay. If my wife is mad at me, and then somebody says, you okay? No, I'm not okay. I've upset somebody, and I'm upset.
That's right.
But if you've been through whatever experience, and you think or people can notice it, people sometimes can diagnose it better than, because people say, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. No, I'm not. Is to say, look, let's talk about it. One of the differences that is, and I read about this, after World War II, when all the troops, came, they didn't get on planes. They got on troop ships and came back to the United States. And one of the things that the psychologists found out is that it was actually good therapy that, you're a week or two, whatever time, because they all had time to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that, they still didn't have post, they didn't call it that way, but they had a chance to talk about it. By the time, Korea, maybe the same thing, but Vietnam was different because we didn't go on troop ships. We did our tours, then we went on a 707. And so we didn't have there was no time to talk to anybody about our experiences with each other. It was, one day you're in Vietnam, 24 hours, 48 hours later, you're in the United States, and you're in a different, it's just different.
Yes.
And so you didn't have any time to decompress. And I think that's also a good thing. And people also sometimes in combat, we used to have it where, we'd have terrible tragedies, and we get together and, and commiserate and talk about it. And sometimes they bring in the chaplain, but you gotta have a way to talk about it, because one difference if somebody has been through, a situation, say, I'm really not into this, my preference would be, don't go. There's something, because you might think that, again, it goes to, oh, you're okay. No, you're not okay. Something isn't working. Maybe it's a sort of a automobile. If one of the cylinders is not working well, I'd rather get somebody else to be on, whatever the mission or the team is, that isn't held back by something, because you might think you're okay, but then you're put in this situation, and then you're going through trauma. Then you're putting not only yourself, but you're putting everybody else in a call it a dangerous or unfortunate or inappropriate place. So that's the only difference. But look, if you've been in situations where it worked, who am I to say don't do it? I personally, I would have a different opinion about it.
No, I love that, and I appreciate you referencing that and sharing that, because it's true. And if you're not 100%, if you're not up to par, then you could potentially hurt other people. And y'all heard that right there. Like, we need to decompress. We need to be aware of how we're actually feeling. And it's really not on us to play the comparison game and to hold ourselves back. It's just not healthy, and it's gonna lead to more bad than good. And if we don't deal with our mess in a healthy way, our mess deals with us. So take heed to what Raymond, a combat veteran, a Army veteran, is sharing with y'all and saying that you need to address it, you need to share it, and there is a healthy dose of commiserating as well that needs to take place. And it's so, I didn't think about that until you said it, about how by default, by the technology at hand and modes of transportation, a lot of that was afforded to people. Now, it wasn't perfect when they got back, but it probably lightened the load of just being in birthing areas together on ships, to be able to share, to commiserate, to memorialize, to be in a somewhat safe environment, but you're not back in the world yet. Vice what happened in the Vietnam years, and then in the, GWAT years and in the Gulf War years, where, yeah, 24 to 48 hours, you are back in the world. And I mean, it's a lot there's no real time for adjustment period. And I think that's more, we've done more of what the approach of being on ships and taking a long time to get back to home in our human history than what we do in modern times, where we're back in the world. Boom. Maybe you go to Kuwait for a little bit, hang out there, and then you get right on a plane and you come right back to America. That sound, I never thought about how effective, even, in ancient times, they would have to road march back to the lands they came from. And there was a lot of time for maybe some healing or maybe some revealing of trauma that they underwent while they were over it in a theater of operations. So that's a sound point, that technology sometimes doesn't always work out the best for us, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, when I was in, you had phones, so yeah, you phone home every once in a while. We didn't have the internet, we didn't have any of that stuff. But there are a lot of other things. When I was growing up, you had a large percentage of people that had served in the military, had done some sort of public service. But now, public service, most people don't do public service. And when I say public service, I mean, I include volunteering or being in the service as being, some form of public service. Very, very few people are in public service. Very, very small percentage of the population has ever been in the military. So they know something about it, but unless you have been in it, you can read about it, you can talk to people, you could say people. Yeah, everybody says, oh yeah, I know somebody that is this. Look, I know people that are PhD. It doesn't make me a PhD, but I know people that are
Yeah.
but if you've had volunteering experience, if you've been involved in experiences with other people, you'll get a perspective. I mean, even now, if I ask people, where's the Gulf of Hormuz, I bet you that people still don't know where it is. If I ask somebody, where's Afghanistan, where's Iraq, we were there for 20 years, and I say, here's a map, I would suggest to you most people would not know where they were. And we spent trillions of dollars there. We spent 20 years, and you can't tell me where these countries are?
That is a fact, and such a fact that the ignorance is so high. And some people, like I said, we don't know what we don't know, and they don't even know that they don't know, because, while America was at war for all those years, while troops were at war for all those years and in conflicts, America was at the mall, and America kept flowing as normal business. So, and there's such a profound thing in what you said, and I'm so glad you hit on it. And I was sharing this yesterday. I had the pleasure and privilege to go and be a guest at an elementary school where I went to each classroom and I read books about military experience, but also in honor of the month of the military child, right? And I was explaining to these children that, to be a hero, to serve, okay, you could be in the military, you could be in the armed services, but also to be a teacher is a form of service. To be a nurse, to be a construction worker building something, to be a firefighter, to be in any of the service worlds. So anybody out there who hears both of us and we're both veterans and you're like, I can't serve in the military because of fill in the blank reason, it may just be something medically holding you back, and you feel like, oh, well, I can never serve. No, that's not true. You could serve at the SPCA. You could serve volunteering at your YMCA and being a youth sports coach, or be at the Boys and Girls Club being a mentor. There's so many ways to serve, y'all. So if you're looking for a way to serve, look around you, wherever you are. I think I learned this from Oprah, quote I put in my book about this, where she says, look around. There's something around you that needs your service. And not all superheroes wear capes, is what I was explaining to these young children. If you're a human being that's unselfish, that cares about other people, that wants to protect other people, make other people safe, and to make other people better, well, you're just as much a superhero as Superman or Wonder Woman or anybody else, because you're willing to do something bigger than you. So please don't, when we say the word service, as Raymond just alluded to, Do not just think about it as cut and dry. I'm not a Marine. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a sailor. I'm not in the Air Force or fill in the blank on what branch of service. So therefore I can't serve. No, no, no. Bull crap. We need you to serve in other ways too. Thank you for pointing that out.
I
Somebody
feel
needed to hear that.
Yeah. It's also, when people say, thank you for your service, that's like saying, it's becomes a cliche.
It does.
And it's like saying, thank you or how are you or have a nice day.
Hmm.
But, if you've really done service, sometimes I'll, if I'm in a sarcastic mood, I'll say, what do you mean by service? Because they really don't know. It's just, again, it's like have a nice day. But I think, when people talk about patriotism, there's a difference between being a nationalist. Nationalist is, you love your country. But being patriotic is, you gotta, it's bigger. Patriotism, I believe, is bigger than yourself.
Amen. Yes.
It's bigger than
Yes.
yourself. So if you haven't been involved in anything that's bigger than yourself, don't give me this that you're a patriot. I mean, you may be patriotic to something. I mean, loyal to something, but that's nationalism.
Hmm.
Patriotic is, that I care about something. I care about it enough that I'm going to do something.
Hmm.
I'm just not going to say it.
I love it.
When I got out of the service, the armed forces was not popular. We were dishonorable. They didn't thank us for our service. They were angry because they were angry at me for decisions that I didn't make. Older people make decisions to send the younger people to war. It's always been that way. But they were angry. But now I've seen an arc of not only just thank you for your service, but I've also seen, and my wife will tell you that I've been agitated about this for 50 years, is that how can you, where they were angry in the 60s, in 2026, it's, you have elected officials. I was in special operations. I was in the SEALs. I was a ranger. They'll now talk about it as if they don't remember what it was that the military and people serving they did not think it was honorable. So now they use all the special ops because that's the cool lingo now. I mean, how many elected officials have you ever said, yes, I served in supply. I typed DD 214s. That's not cool, but I was a helicopter pilot. I was a jet fighter pilot. They'll all say the cool things. The typists, they did all those things that got me paid a lot, and make sure all the things arrive for what I need. So they were just patriotic as we've talked about, as anybody else. Very few people will ask me a supplementary question of why'd you serve, or if I did, sometimes there's a standard. Well, I didn't want to go to Vietnam because I didn't want to die. Well, I didn't go to Vietnam because I wasn't looking to die. I mean, I drove on errands today in my car. I'm not going out to die. I mean, I went out for errands.
Yes. Yes. That's so true.
So there might have been something unexpected, but it's like, I'm not sure if, as a psychologist, because is that people will say it, they'll get that mantra. And it's like, if they say it, it's like saying, the Lord's Prayer.
Hmm. Hmm. Or somebody sneezes, you say, God bless you. And it's like, did you really want God to bless them in that moment? Yeah.
So we get these terms. I'll tell you, when somebody says sorry about that, unfortunately, or I apologize, those are the three things that send me. That disrupts my amygdala and my endorphins, because it doesn't mean anything. It's like, I'm sorry about that. Okay, and now what else? What are you going to do about it? Or unfortunately. I'll say, unfortunately, you're being stupid, or,
Yes.
no, but brings, unfortunately. So actually, I use a black swan negotiator. When they say unfortunately, I'll say, seems like there's nothing you can do to help me. Now that might change their opinion, but to others, the assumption is, if you say the magic words, if you say these words, there's something. Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
But it isn't. It's a term in order to say, I don't really want to tell you anything more. I don't really want to help you. So I'll say these things so that you'll accept it and go away.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I get triggered. It fires up my system whenever someone is disingenuine. If you genuinely tell me to, go to hell, I appreciate that because it was genuine. But if you know,
You know what
checking
I
the
would say
box,
if you said, I say, you know what I would say, and I've learned these negotiating skills, which I wish I'd learned 50 years ago. I would have said, Cam, seems like you're not happy with me. Seems like I said something that upsets you. See, that's going to help you to say, well, maybe Raymond's trying to understand.
hmm
Maybe
hmm
Raymond's trying to be empathetic because uh, d- uh, and these are skills I talk about this myself is that one of the things that I think people um, need to learn, must learn, is negotiate. You need to learn how to negotiate because it helps in everything in your life. And you don't think that negotiating, you don't get in many negotiating situations. Anytime, if you have kids, you're negotiating with them all the time. It's a constant
yes,
negotiation.
yes,
If somebody says, "What do you think about this?" for negotiation, or "I need your help," negotiations happen all the time. What we don't know is we don't know how to negotiate. We don't know how to. I'll give you an example of people will ask me, what are you gonna do this weekend? Now that could be a trap of saying, they may commit you to something you don't want to do. So I'll say, what makes you ask?
that's good. Yeah, because everybody always has an agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you get the 40 calls. How you doing? How you doing? And so what I've learned to say is, seems like there's something you want to tell me, or how's your day? There was Braxton Bragg, who was a general in the Confederate Army. People would ask him this and he'd say, how much do you want to know? Uh, but these go back to cliches. But if you ask somebody, you say, it seems you have something on your mind. I can't, it's like when you ask me about resilience, give me an idea of what resilience is. I can give you all kinds of examples, but it may not really answer or provide, useful information until I have some idea of where do you want me to go with this, or what information can I say that can be useful to you.
Yes. Yes.
And in the military, I read this, you see this on News. I'll give you an example. A.P. Hill, second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, or was it the first day? No, in the first day. Lee gives A.P. Hill an order of, take Little Round Top or take, some hill, but if convenient or if appropriate. So Hill says, look, my troops are tired. I didn't take the hill. So the Union troops take the hill. But what Lee really meant is take the damn hill.
So say that, Lee. I'm with you on that. I'm with you. That's why I hate sometimes in the military, especially on the officer side, they'd be like, it is highly encouraged. And I'd be like, why don't you just say you want it done? Don't give me that highly encouraged crap. Just say it, do it. You know what I mean? Like, I hate that because it's like a passive aggressive talk and then you're assuming that I should know. And then that creates tension and just miscommunication and misunderstandings. And just tell me what you want and I'll do it, boss.
Yeah, it was sort of polite language, but sometimes, in the film The Paper Chase, where Professor Kingsfield, somebody be rambling on, he says, "Get to the point." These are other things that you need to. Sometimes you just need to get to the point of saying, it's imperative or it's important that you do this. Rather, one of the things that in our culture, and I'm sure in other culture, and maybe in different ways, is and I can't remember in the military. Sometimes it's just I'm giving you an order, but you also, I mean, you taught, what is a lawful order, what's a legal order, baloney. But I also think that people, when they're giving instructions, people say, "Why'd you do that?" Because that makes you feel defensive.
hmm
A good negotiating is, what made you do that? Because
Mm.
then you're going to give me a reason. I mean, look, we all do things that are call it stupid or inappropriate. It's just what we do. But if you get the slap down of why'd you do that, it's like, oh, I feel God, I'm really stupid. If for nothing else, say, why'd you do that? I really wanted to do that.
Yeah.
It may have been stupid, but I want. But I wanted to do that. But I also get back to also, about we were talking about mental health and things, is that if if you have certain symptoms, and certainly drinking or addiction, that's a sure sign. It's a symptom of other things.
Yes.
Either within yourself have the resilience or the judgment. People always say common sense. I know, well, if everybody had common sense, we'd know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
But I use a longer to is your judgment. Is it, because judgment means to me, and there was common sense says either you've been through something and so you won't do it again. But judgment is, I'm going to think this thing through, and then if I want to be stupid about it, I'll do it. But at least my judgment says this is what I thought about doing, so I did it. And it may be good judgment, it may be bad judgment, but at least you're trying to get information. But life is not simple. If we were simple, we'd all be good at it. That's why I'm a little bit annoyed with God. And I'll tell you why. If you have faith and you believe in God, then he should have done it differently. First of all, he should have, the sex should have been really complicated, and everything else could be, a childbirth and living would be a lot easier. But I think he made sex simple and everything else a lot more complicated.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I like that. I like that. You should go to an open mic and try that one. That one's good. Because if you go, hold on, what do you mean? And you're like, because it's true. It's true. A lot of the other stuff comes as a result of something that's pretty easy to accomplish. But it's like some of that bears gifts that you didn't want.
Well, the term you're looking for is consequences.
Yes.
What made it look simple, that were consequences. How many times have has something come out of our mouth that as soon as we say it, and as soon as, this was really stupid. It was really dumb, but you can't take it back. But the consequences of what you've done, can, depending on the situation, either be, severe or catastrophic. You say something to somebody and it hurts their feelings, and, maybe it gets them more depressed so, I don't know where I'm going with this, but somehow it just seemed that these are things that, judgmental things or consequences of what I've learned in my life, or things from the military, or things that I learned at the military, but actually things that the military taught me, or ideas that I've lived, not the least of which is when I was growing up, my parents were educated, and I'm not talking about high school graduate. I mean, I'm talking about people, they were lawyers, so they had college degrees, they had advanced degrees, they were learned people. And if you don't believe me, they will tell you they were learned. If they were alive, they will tell you how learned they. And you thought, that they had all this wisdom. But when I went in, basic training, I knew of no one that was married. I knew of no one that was not a high school graduate. I knew of no one that, didn't have personal security, you know what I mean by, food and shelter, or didn't have an abusive childhood. And you go into basic training and you see people whose lives I never would have known, never would have understood until I was there. I mean, it gave me an awareness and appreciation that, I've awareness of things that if I hadn't done that, maybe I would, but it's doubtful, because then you go back to whatever, your bubble.
Whatever you already know, right? Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, but I love what you said right there, because the education that you get when being in the armed services, you can't put on a piece of paper. Like my daughter right now is serving, a lot of her friends went off to college and stuff, but my daughter joined the Marine Corps and is serving overseas right now.
Your daughter's, wait a minute, you're only 35, Camp.
Yeah. If you say so,
man.
But what I say is to a lot of people.
Now that caught me off guard. I had no idea that you had
21 years old, serving in the United States Marine Corps. Just became a meritorious corporal. She's a meritorious. She got promoted from merit, but she's crushing it. But what I tell people is
from boot camp.
What's that now?
From boot camp.
No, she was just a E1. She came in E1, and then she's been in for about 2 years now. But she's crushing it. But the thing is some people say, well, is she off at college? And I said, she's off at a type of college. She's off at a type of educational institute. And I think the education she's gaining there is going to be far more worth it if she, when she gets out or she EASs and then goes to college, because of the discipline she's going to learn and the awareness for other people. And the fact that there's, we're all just this makeup of just all these different socioeconomic statuses and cultures and even geographical locations. And we all come together for that one thing, to protect and serve that Constitution. And the education that you get in that space, it just informs you so much, because like you said, when the judgment and the consequences, and then the fact of the ignorance that we just don't know, if we don't get informed by another option or another source of information, we will just keep on going on with business as usual, which may not be what's good for us, depending on how the pendulum swings or what your background and experiences are. So I think for you to admit that and to say that, I think that's the real experience of education that people get when they come in, because you come in from one side of life and then you meet all these different people, and it really just gives you an overall compassion and empathy for others, and an awareness to, if nothing else, you're tolerant of other people that may not see things the same way you do, because you understand they come from something totally different, and here we are together with this common goal. And I think that's what universities were originally designed for, was to do that. But just the way everything is, it's kind of just not equal, to where we don't get the nuances. You do at universities for sure, but you don't get the same amount of nuances that you get in the serving in the armed services. So I just agree. I'm thankful that you touched on that.
It's true. But after World War II, when you had the GI Bill, you had tens of thousands of veterans. That changed everything too.
Yes.
It was one of the best pieces of legislation that
Amen.
ever did was the GI Bill, because it made America, and it made a lot of people that never would have been able to go to college. But that changed college campuses too, because they had been through every kind of experience you could think of. And so when they were in college, they weren't there to use the term goof off. They were
Right.
because they wanted an education. They had been through severe life experiences. A lot of them, were married and have children. They weren't there. They weren't there for
No.
to get better lives than they knew it. And they weren't. They were in their 20s or 30s. My father, as I told you, had already had all this education before he went into the service. But he actually went back to school in the GI Bill, got another master's degree in LLM. So, he used the GI Bill. It was available. Why not? So
Yeah. It was a life changer for me. I tell people, and I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm just saying that if I can, anybody can. But I only finished 8th grade, and I came in with a GED, and I was an at-risk youth, as they call us, or an untapped potential youth. That's what I like to look at it as when I work with young people who are in adverse situations. But through the Marine Corps, I was able to use my GI Bill, and I was never a successful student growing up, and I only finished 8th grade, everyone. And through the Marine Corps and through discipline, I eventually got to go to university, and I finished my 4-year degree. But when I was there, it was similar to what you're describing. And some of the other veterans I was with, it was work. It was a job. We showed up with like our little coffee, little canister, and we had our little lunchbox, and we were there. And then, no diss to them, but they don't know what they don't know. But there would be these students that would come in, our peers that were 10 years younger than us, but they were coming in high in pajamas, leaving early, or literally just being on their phone the whole time when we were there, because it's like, okay, we got shot at to be here, so we're going to take this serious, right? And we're here for a means to an end. Mine was to eventually become commissioned, but for other veterans that were in the room, they were trying to take that accomplishment and learn, actually. And what college is great, and what you said about community college is so amazing, because you learn how to learn. Like that's what I learned. I can't tell you all the things I learned, but I learned how I learned best. And I also learned to call BS when I see a headline and I go, what's the source of that? Or some of that clickbait doesn't get me, because I go and I try to find, where's the real source of what's really going on here? That was a skill that I don't think I'd be the person I am now, to question things and to, because part of patriotism is to not always agree with what your government does, but you're willing to die for the freedom of that. So that's a lot being said right there. But I so agree with you, for all of us that are veterans, and some are there for some are that old guy at the fraternity too, trying to get the fun and trying to goof around. But for the majority, you take it serious in a different level, and you learn how to learn, and you're there for the experience of what it is, which is to learn from others. Whereas some other people might just be there to let's just say goof off, you know?
Look, I go back to something I said. If you've been, in any, if you're older, if you've been involved in any, the service or any kind of public service, is that learning, you got to be organized.
Yes.
You got to say, what are the assignments? What are the readings? What's expected of me, and how am I going to get organized to do all this stuff? And you have to do it for a job, whether you're self-employed or you work for a company. You got to be organized, where you got to say, what time am I going to show up? What's my business uniform? What's my hygiene? What skills do I need to learn? You got to be organized to do that. If you want, if you want, when I say successful, maybe that's too easy a term. But if you want, actually, I just thought about it. If you want fulfillment,
Yes.
if you want fulfillment in your life, you got to be, it's helpful to be organized. And what I mean by organized is to say, I have a plan, organized, maybe I have a plan, or I have a goal, or I have tasks. These are the things that I need to accomplish in order to, get to where I want to go. If I want to feel fulfillment in my job, whatever it may be, what do I need to do in order to be fulfilled? And, arriving and you're on 3 hours of sleep and you're hungover, you're not going to have a fulfilling day. Trust me, I've tried all those things.
Me too. Me too. Yeah, you're not going to reach your full potential because you're coming from an empty tank. You got no fuel in the tank, and it's just. But I'll tell you one thing I learned, and nobody can look at this, but I have a page. It might look like I'm over here on my phone, but I learned in the Marine Corps, because we used to get in trouble when we were young E2s, E3s. If we went and saw a gunny, if we went and saw our E7, and we didn't have something to write with and write on, we were in trouble. And it also, but what he taught us was
You needed a writing implement.
That's right, and I still stay with it.
And you needed writing implement and paper all the time in your pockets.
Well, you needed like a little memorandum and a piece and something to write with, because like the Chinese proverb says, the dullest pencil is sharper than my memory. But I had a first sergeant, he used to always say,
and they taught you that at boot camp?
No, I learned it when I was in the fleet, in the actual operating forces.
And that was a requirement.
And it stuck with me
we never had that, because we had a lot of people that I really believe could not reading or writing. I mean, actually, I do that too. I mean, I don't always carry paper, but I always carry a pen. I don't always bring paper, but I do bring a writing implement. That's a very good idea. I like that.
It has helped me out so much because, especially being an artist now and having ideas, if you don't write it down, you will forget it. It's just the way it is. I don't care how good your memory is. And the older I get, the worse it gets. So if I don't write it down, it won't happen. So that's part of my organization. But
Cam, you never were sarcastic if a gunny says, "I want to tell you something," that you didn't come back and say, "Let me write down whatever stupid thing that you're going to tell me." Tell me.
Well, you know what I tell people, Raymond, and it's what you alluded to in the beginning. I am the product of patient leaders who didn't throw the book at me a time or two, that allowed me to reach my full potential. So, you know what I mean?
Bingo. Is that you had people that were wise enough to say you're a work in progress, but in the words of Seneca, you had potential. So they saw potential.
Yeah, and I'm the product of that, because if it was just up to me, I'd have probably failed out a long time ago. Yeah, but I had good leaders that were patient with me and that taught me things. And also, it's a sign of respect to that. If you're talking to somebody, anybody, especially of authority, that you have something to write with and write on, because what they're saying may not be for you to just be like, I see people in, like, before I left and I was on the officer side sitting in staff meetings and they had nothing to write with and write on. And I'm like, are you really going to remember everything the CO's saying right now with their intentions and how we need to carry out things? And like, of course we have commander's intent, and then we have left and right lateral limits, but like, this is pretty important stuff. And it just shows a sign of courtesy and respect to that person.
If they record it, I see all these recording devices that people can have. Are you okay with that?
Well, in our spaces, we couldn't have it because we were behind secret stuff and you couldn't have electronic devices. So it really was old school. And then, obviously if it's something that's
that way, because I mean, I see all these, hidden recording devices.
Yeah, some people do that. I'm old school. I gotta, if I'm going to read something, I got to print it off but I had a first sergeant of mine. He used to always say what you were saying about knowing what's expected of you. He used to say, right time, right place, right gear, something's getting done. But if you don't have right time, right place, right gear, nothing's getting done. And I'd be like, right time, right place, right gear, right time, right place, right gear. And it just sticks because you need to be right time, right place, right gear. And then something can happen. But if you don't have that organization on the front end or that accountability, then you're really saying, screw you to everyone else who did, but also you're not prepared. So what's up with that? It's good mentors, good mentors. And I didn't always like them.
Maybe you had a more cooperative. When I was in, it was not a cooperative because you had the draft and there was unfairness with that. And they were also bringing in people that a lot of them should never have been in the military.
Never been there, yeah.
And that was a problem. One of the things that happened to me was, I went in and I cooperated. I was not a disciplinary problem. However, sometimes a lot of sergeants or people would take advantage of the situation.
Mm.
And it was not a smart move because they had so many people going AWOL, so many people had, a problem, and I was not a problem. So I had a specific situation. When I was with the 82nd, see, is this the 81st or 82nd podcast?
I wish we'd have done 82 just for you, but it's 81st.
I was with the 82nd, and it was sort of late in my time at Fort Bragg, but I drove for the brigade commander, but I was a specialist, so I still had to do all the other, the KP and the guard duty and all that. But I was supposed to be exempt, but they didn't make me exempt for some reason. So I was on KP, and so rather than argue about it. So anyway, the brigade commander says, "Where's Lavine?" Well, he's on KP. He went ballistic. I know, it was the first sergeant was giving me some problems on something. So I went to the sergeant major and I said, "Look, I'm doing what you're ordering or what I'm supposed to do, but I can't be at two places at the same time. So you're going to have to give me some, guidance and enlightenment on this." So what I was saying was compelling enough. So he calls the first sergeant, says, "Leave him alone." And I thought, and as you know, he was a command sergeant major. He wasn't just a sergeant major. Command sergeant major is it's a sergeant major, but it's a special designation to say we're in command. And as anybody in this earth, if you want to hear the voice of God, you want to hear the voice of Moses, you want to hear the voice of Jesus, listen to a sergeant major, because
Yes.
that's the voice. So the voice went into the first sergeant of my company to say, "Leave him alone." No problem, because I had a compelling thing of, if you want anything, these things to work and you're having all these problems, I'm showing up. I'm doing what it is you've asked me to do. Why am I being harassed and hazed for something that I'm cooperating? I mean, get the plot here.
Mm-hmm.
If you want things done. So that was actually a wonderful moment where I heard the voice of God.
Yeah, I've had definitely some sergeants major and some first sergeants and some master sergeants and some gunnies that were the voice of God in many situations for me. I wouldn't be who I am without those ranks and a few others that molded me and were patient with me. And
if you learn from the good ones, because they don't have to be learned. And what I mean by learned, they went to college, they had a 4-year degree, they went
whatever.
They went to the military academy. There were some duds, even if they went through all that. But there were a number of enlisted people, or even some officers, that really got the plot. I mean,
That's right.
They were the ones that, if you were in a bad situation, those are people I wanted to be with.
That's right. Yeah, and they were most likely probably about we and not me. And unselfishness is such I don't care who you are. And I know a lot of people with degrees and all that PhDs. And you know what? I know a lot of educated fools. I know some people that have no educational, credentials, but they are very educated because they take time to read books. They take time to learn life. And they're some of the wisest, most genuine, good people. So to me, just because you have a degree doesn't mean that you're smart.
No, it just means you learn how to take the test. You learn how to whatever it is. But there's some people went through a course and took the test and then couldn't remember anything.
That's true. It's true.
But a lot of these people, they really have good life skills and get the plot. I learned as much from them as I learned from any college course or any book I read. So they bring up they learned how to be resilient.
Yes.
Learned about failure. They had whatever background, and they succeeded because of the things that they wanted to do. So I could summarize it. They had wisdom.
Yes.
I thought a lot of them had real wisdom. If you have the patience and the understand, it's just shut up and listen to them. Just be
Yes.
quiet, dynamic, silent. Just listen to them. The things that they'll tell you are just astonishing.
It really is. It really is. Amen. Yeah. I do want to backtrack for a second because one of the things that really jumped out at me that you shared, Raymond, and I know that, we retire from service or whatever, but what I look at it as that we repurpose service. And I know in this chapter of your life, you do not want people to feel that lack of attention, you don't want people to feel invisible, and nobody wants to feel unsafe. And I know in this chapter of your life that you're doing now, you are helping people have that sense of security and helping people have that sense of safety. Would you share that with our guests or with our listeners, if you could, just because there's a lot of friction and a lot of stress in life that are consequences of bad judgment, and part of bad judgment is not being prepared or being organized. So I know in this chapter you're doing things to really help people. So if you wouldn't mind sharing and elaborating on that, sir.
Okay, well, it's just to summarize what I do is I'm an extended care benefit advisor. And what that really means is I consult with people and design long-term care insurance plans, that is caregiving plans, so that if you need help with your caregiving, that I'm the money guy. I'm the person that can help you keep not to get the attention. I'm the person that can help you not feel invisible. And as we talked about, is that I'll help you. I can almost guarantee that you won't feel vulnerable because you have the resources available for people to help you. What's wrong with having people help you? I like people to help you. In fact, one of the things I say is actually in a couple months, my wife, or actually next month, my wife's going to need knee surgery, is that I don't really like caregiving. I don't like being a caregiver. It doesn't mean that I don't want to be responsible for helping my wife, but I don't, some of the mundane daily stuff, we're going to hire somebody to do it because I don't want to do it. Now, does that mean I won't drive her some places? I mean, I won't do tasks and responsibility? Of course I will. But if it's, some of the daily things, my wife would actually be happier if somebody else did it
Yeah,
than if you have me do it. So it's not that I don't care. It's what do I care about, or what am I good at? Because I'm not good at everything, and I don't have to be, because then it allows me to do things that I need to do or accomplish tasks that help everybody. But if I'm so responsible for taking care of somebody else, if you think that taking care of kids is tough, try taking care of an adult that
yes.
has more rights and more responsibility, and you can't pick up and say, sit here. It's harder to do that with adults, and they also have the more, in most cases, more cognitive skills. They can do things to you that, a child may not have the mental capacity at that point to do. They will learn it. But what I help people to do is to have caregiving with dignity and fulfillment, because just because you need care doesn't mean your life is over. Just because you have people helping you doesn't mean you can't continue to lead a life of significance. What it means is that it will help you to continue your life. The difference is that you need help. And what's wrong with somebody helping you? I like all the help I can get.
That's right.
All the assistance I can get. But the thing is, assistance, it isn't free. Just isn't free. Volunteering isn't free. Service isn't free. You can volunteer, but that means you're paying, you're giving up something. And it's not in a bad way. It's saying I'm willing to do it, but there is a financial cost to it. So if I can leave a legacy of as many people as I can talk to, as many people, if I can say, make sure you have a caregiving plan, then I've done that helps me to live a better life of significance. Or even if somebody says, look, I'm a veteran, I can get veterans benefit. Not so quick. Especially if you need, veterans benefits for caregiving, you may be eligible, but you're not entitled. It's based on what the level of caregiving is. It depends on your economic circumstances. And even if all those things, there could still be a delay. So then you have to sometimes do it yourself. Doesn't help. So sometimes you have to pay money to have somebody to help you with the benefits. And even if you have them, then it's somebody else that's making the rules of saying, much of the benefits, how many hours, who, who you can hire, who you can't. And one of the things that I can help make a difference is if you need veterans benefits and you qualify, do it. Why not? But also there are consequences to, um, you know, how much can, can you make your own choices, or is somebody else telling you what to do, or how, or saying, here are the limits. And most people like to make, their own choices, or at least, make their own decisions. Doesn't make it bad one way or another, but you just have to know that sometimes, you're in a situation, and if you have choices, it's what people want to do, so long as they make, appropriate choices. I don't know what always the right choices, but I think we know the difference of appropriate choices
Yeah.
might be. But if you have people that, those that need caregiving and those that are caregiving aren't always capable or nice people. So you got to find people that you can cooperate with. And so if you have people that say this is the only one, or if it doesn't work out, you can only go through so many times. But if you have choices, I mean, you can go through agencies to eventually define what what you're looking for. But that's what I can help people do, is even if you don't become a client of mine, that if I can give you insight to say, look, here are your choices, here are the things, make a decision what you think would be appropriate for you. But you have to know whatever decision you make, you got to live with that decision.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think
Hope
it's
is not a
beautiful, but
plan, man. Hope is not
yeah,
a plan.
it's not. It's a course of action. It can fuel us. I think what's really cool is that you expressed was that for you being in the position, and you've already expressed that you love and you appreciate your bride. However, you're not at the echelon of care that she may need. And also, I've seen this happen. I know people that I get mentorship from. They don't intend for it to be this way, but when you say that I'm going to be the caregiver as the spouse or as the immediate family member, there's a certain level of resentment that may be there as you being the one to provide the care, being out of your echelon, missing out on the other things that you could be doing or should be doing to find fulfillment and to find where you could be most effective. When if you had someone that's a subject matter expert come in going through her rehabilitation from the knee, well, now there's a subject matter expert that's credible, that's effective. You're still able to do what you do, and you obviously still care for her, but that caregiver that's an actual occupation and is an expert in it, can give the most effective care to her. And then that just sounds like a win-win. And there's a way to avoid a lot of unnecessary stress, friction, and believe it or not, maybe resentment that you may potentially have towards your wife because you have to take care of her in all these different kinds of ways. I hope everybody's understand what I'm saying the right way.
Yes.
Raymond definitely cares about his wife. He cares about her so much, he wants to make sure she gets the best care she can get, and Raymond might not be the one to give it.
And we all need respite, sometimes from each other. Just because you're in a relationship, you don't have. I mean, I come from a generation was supposed to be, the couples, and they're supposed to do everything together. On this, I'm really glad that the culture has evolved. You don't need to do everything together, and sometimes it's healthier. There's a term for it. I love you for better or for worse, but not necessarily for lunch.
It is true, but I love what you said too when you expressed your relationship with your bride and you were talking about working things out and growing together and being resilient. The thing I tell people outside of abuse, okay, don't hear me wrong, y'all. Outside of abuse, I think, at least in my experience, if my bride and I, and I'm not casting stones or judgment, got divorced for a lot of the reasons other people got divorced, we'd probably be on our like 17th divorce at this point. However, married life outside of abuse is not perfect, but being with someone and growing with someone, it is worth it. Other people think I'm crazy. My wife knows I'm crazy. So there's a certain level of of just love through the years that grows. But again, don't hear me wrong. If there's physical abuse or some other form of abuse and you're not safe, then maybe that's a reason to part ways. But for most other reasons, majority, not to sound like I'm preaching from a pulpit of perfection, married life is not perfect, but sticking it out, working together, growing together, compromising, adapting to each other and growing to your full potential. It may not be perfect, but it's usually worth it. That's just my experience. But we do need respite too. Sometimes I don't want to, yeah.
Some people are just not relationship material. But if you're relationship material and you have somebody that you care about, it still may be, it doesn't work out, and you decide, not to have a relationship. But there that this is where intermediaries can help you
Yeah.
realize, because sometimes you don't always know how to talk about, and it could be because of maturity, maybe because you're just so used to doing things a different way, that changing your habit, and habits can be changed, but it takes work. In a way, it's, habits are sort of are like an addiction. It could be smoking, it could be drinking, it could be weight, it could be what time you get up in the morning. It could be spending. There are a lot of habits we have. Some are good habits and some are not. But if you want to change it, then there's a process of how you do it. There's a book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, a book about habits and how people get into habits and how people could change it. But when I listen again to a lot of relationships, sometimes I listen to the person. Sometimes I'll say to them, I just don't think you're in relationship material. Especially if you're going through a sequence of people, that maybe you need to say, well. If you have relationship issues, perhaps you ought to ponder or find out why things aren't working. And usually it's something about your personality, your way of doing things. You're not listening. Abuse is a different, but that I
Yes.
think is a form of a disease, where that's violence, and
Yeah. That's not it.
that's violent, and that's different than look, people build up resentments.
Hmm.
You say something at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then at 9 o'clock at night, you find out what crime and misdemeanor you've done. They didn't tell you before, and it's like, got all these other things. Now you're it was people build up resentments.
Hmm.
And if you have that kind of personality, sometimes, people need to tell you that you need to, again, change your habit, to say, maybe you shouldn't be dismissive, condescending, and pretentious. Perhaps you need to change, the way that you have to learn how to deal with people. And if you don't, and you want to be that kind of person, be, there's a, there, being alone, then be alone. Don't be around other people. You're not relationship material.
Yeah, no, that's so well said. And that's that awareness. That's that awareness of ourselves and really how we can reach our full potential. And sometimes that full potential is to make that what I just thought about when you were talking about habits. And this is actually the First Amendment, but also the most inspiring quote as to why I started doing the show, which I make no money off of. Everybody, I do no ads, no nothing like that. I just try to share good information, let people know they're not alone. But when Maya Angelou said, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. That is the reason for this show, that quote right there, because there's a lot of things that we don't like. Well, then change it. And if we can't change it, we need to adapt and potentially conform to it. But I think in the spirit of relationships, there's a lot of irreconcilable differences that could be reconciled if we were willing to embrace different habits and new perspectives and things of that nature. But abuse, by far, no, that's not safe. That's not where anybody needs to be at. But I'm just saying some stuff can be reconciled if it's worth it to you. If not, then you part ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think you're a bad person because the relationship didn't work out. But is this something that I'm willing to evolve with and adapt to, or is this something that's just not worth it? And that's where people make their decisions. But outside of abuse, I think a lot of things can be worked out in all relationships, not just marriages, but in all relationships. But that tension, that resentment, it becomes a cancer, and it just eats up everything. It really does. And yeah. It's not good. I really appreciate you spending this time. And I know I went over because I run my mouth a lot. And I just thank you so much.
Cam, you may think that I'm just being patronizing. If you don't know what patronizing means, just trying to agree with you.
Hmm.
I've learned as much from you as maybe you and your audience have learned from me. I've learned a lot from you. I've gotten perspective or somebody's way of thinking that I hadn't thought about today, or somebody I haven't been around in a while. I've benefited from the situation, from this podcast and from this interaction. Um, I've learned from you.
Thank you. And I've learned a lot from you, not just in this conversation, but since our first dialogue along the way. Everybody out there, Raymond helped me be more organized on my end, and it's just been a very patient.
What did I do?
Oh yes, man. You put me on with the calendar stuff and with the booking of everything and just the dialogue, and so kindly he just guided me, and that was, we didn't even know each other, we hadn't even talked verbally to each other, but I've learned a lot from you since the first email correspondence that me and you have been going back and forth with, and then also the grace when I had to adjust some things on my end. So I'm definitely learning from you, my friend.
We need to stay in contact. We need.
No, I will. You're stuck with me now.
Oh, hallelujah!
I appreciate you
Praise
so
Moses.
much, because the thing I love about just in our correspondence, you were willing to tell me maybe where I was falling short in such a tactful and direct way, and I was like, you know what, he's right, and that, instead of holding a grudge or having a resentment to me and being like, this guy Cam is crazy, you actually took the time. The people that correct us in life, the people that take the moment to kind of bring something to our attention and guide us, those are the people that really care about us. It's just in the moment sometimes when we're immature, we're like, oh my God, that staff sergeant or that sergeant hates me, because no, actually that staff sergeant cares because they actually stopped to make the correction on you, and to take the time to guide you. So I'm grateful for you, sincerely, and for all the time, because time is such a vital currency in our lives. It's the one thing you give people. We can, in modern technology, we can give each other organs and ask for them back, but we can never get the time we give someone. So I thank you for your time, for real.
My pleasure, Cam. If you ever want me back someday, I'm sure we'll probably figure out other things
Yes.
we could talk about if you ever want me
No,
back.
I'd love to, and I'd love to hear more about, and I'm going to get the links from you, and I'm going to make sure when I edit this episode, all of y'all will see the captions that shows all the resources and where you can get in touch with Raymond. And if you want to have that extended care benefit advisor and to be more prepared for the future, he can guide you in good directions and give you good insight. Even if, like you said, even if you're not my client, I'm going to still try to guide you in the best way possible. So I'll definitely be sharing that. But there's one question, sir, I ask every guest on here, because I think that, to occur in my
respond.
Huh?
Well, I know how to respond. Have I thought
You
of
will. You will from the
you?
question. You will. So the question is this, because we're losing too many people too. I feel like is one of the most preventable way of deaths is death by suicide. We're losing too many people these days. All populations, not just veteran. But if someone right now were contemplating death by suicide and they were on the verge of making that decision or going in that direction, and you had the opportunity to be aware of that and then say something to them, what would you say to them?
Well, I mean, the easy thing to say is, get help. If I sense something, I'll say, Look, it seems like you're going through some difficult issues." I'd ask it as a tactical empathy question. Seems like you're hurting. Seems like you have some issues. Just be quiet. Just be quiet. Don't try to answer the question, because I don't know what the answer is. I haven't been that. We have had my daughter, and the nature of our home. We have a fair amount of musicians that come to our house for various reasons, and I would say a good proportion of them are recovering everything, you know, alcohol, drugs, all kinds of things. So one of the things that we do at our home is that when we have events, is that if we know that somebody is on the spectrum of some issue, we don't say, hey, have a drink. We say, look, we have beverages. We are aware, because if you've had an addiction, you're recovering, but you're never recovered, never. And so what we do, and actually my wife and my daughter have actually made me more aware of this than I was, is that don't make it simple for them, is keep the temptation away, or to say, look, we have this going on, but we have this, so that and we make it in a way where you're comfortable with that situation. We have at the we have all these beverages. We don't say drinks, we say beverages. And that way they can say, yeah, I'll have this ginger beer, or I'll have this, soft drink or something. I'll have this water. The other things are around. They know it. I know it. They're musicians. They play in all kinds of places, but just make it as if it's normal. It's typical. This is what it is. So if I do have somebody that and this, interesting, you bring this up. This happens, all the time, where somebody will do something, they'll get in your way, they'll say something, and and you take and you get angry back. You use your emotions back, like in essence, to say your mama. But they may be going through something that you're just not aware. A lot of people, they had a fight. the bank called them and said, you owe us money. The doctor called or the nurse called, hey, you got a problem. And so they're going to go with that anxiety and they will often take it out on other people, when they're in public. So one of the things that I've become aware is that I don't always know. So either I might be overly polite and I might say, I'll hold the door for them. I'll say, seems like you have this, hey, I'll say, today is your day. I'm holding the door. Or if they're really, I might say, they might be doing, hi, my name is Raymond. Now I've made it personal. You don't get angry, as angry with people to make it personal. But these are learned things, or to be aware. And this happens, all the time. People will, hey, I'm sneaking through and I'll make a thing of, well, you can't sneak anymore, man, because, I can see you. But obviously, if there's something you're more in a hurry than I am, I will stand aside. I'm not going to fight for counter space. Or, if there's something, if you want to get it, I'll stand aside. You get what you need to do, and I will give you space to do it rather than you're in my space. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's kind of obvious. Traveling, it's worse than weddings. It brings out the worst in people
That's so true.
because you're in a tight space. You've gone through all the indignities, and you're having all these people that I mean, even I mean, you having all this anxiety. Am I going to get on the plane? You know, will I get my seat? Can I put my luggage up there? Is somebody going to ask me? Can I change seats? Or you're sitting in tight confinement, and you're having people that they want the arm space, or they've been through all these and it's tough. Your amygdala and your endorphins are challenged. Your mental health is challenged. And it takes a lot to, overcome that to get, other people calm. So you don't even have to be in, I mean, actually, as I'm going through this arc of, my talk, is that there are a lot of people that maybe are a long way from saying, I really feel I want the death experience to, if I can do something that, can make your endorphins and your amygdala a little bit happier, you're not going to be thinking about death. You're going to be thinking about, your life and what you want because I've given an act of understanding and empathy that maybe I don't know all your situation, but I think I know enough that something is going on. So if I can not aggravate and do something that's going to, make you even angrier, that I think everybody's going to be better off. You're going to be better off. I'm going to be better off. And maybe emotionally, whatever is charging you is to say, it's okay. You just you need time to get your mental health in a different situation. I mean, this happens to me personally all the time. Sometimes I make the worst decision because I'm in a hurry or I'm angry, I'm frustrated. I make, but sometimes I'll get up and I'll walk around and do something and I'll get perspective and I'll make a better decision. I'll have thought it out rather than, all those angry people. I mean, so many things. Look, I've written letters to people, sent it, where, I've caused more nuclear explosions than happened in World War II. I have, or of course with email, it's easier. You get an email and whatever it is, and then you read it again. Say, oh, they were saying, if I had just read it or thought about it and been calmer, I wouldn't have responded back because now whatever it was that they were annoyed about, you've thrown a flamethrower back on them.
Yes.
And so all you're doing is you're having these one-way flame throwing conversations. I'll look at it, and I mean, unless it's kind of response where I can give an appropriate response, and I'm not upset. Is that if somebody has sent me something that is upsetting, I'll put it away for a while, think about it, and I'll decide if I make a response, or I can just do a thing. Somebody says something, it seems like I did the wrong thing. And then they can tell me, don't throw the email back or the text back. It's too easy to do it as a one-way conversation. And you haven't verbally explained it. So all they're doing is they're saying the words,
Hmm.
but they don't know what the music is.
Hmm.
Is what are my words? So that's a long way of answering about, if somebody, is really in a bad, I mean, really devastated mental state, maybe they're thinking about it, but maybe if they have acts of kindness or understanding, look, I'm not going to say to somebody, look, you're having a bad day. It looks like you're going to commit suicide. Go see somebody. That may be too much
Yeah,
even
true.
think about. It may be, little stages of which then they have to have acceptance of, I need to do something, but also it's not that you need to do something. It's what do you need to do and who do you need? How are you gonna find out the appropriate, assistance that you need? And look, there's also another thing in the military, it's just as true in the civilian life, is that if you have a career and you tell somebody you have mental health issues, people don't understand mental health, or they think that mental health is a, well, it's a form of a disease, but it's not incurable. And that doesn't mean there are a lot of functioning people that have mental illness. There are a lot of, but if you, but where I'm going with it, it becomes a stigmatized.
Yes.
Uh, it's like, saying I'm a parolee or I've had, a criminal background. You've been charged.
Like you're just labeled forever now, and that's what you are forever, right?
The point is that we make mistakes, but some people will use the mistake as if, it's a stigma rather than, you need help. How are you going to do, how are you going to rehabilitate? How are you going to help people? Because people aren't going to be helped if you just say, well, you had a mental health issue. You did this there, that we don't trust you. The way I say it now, especially, when people do it to me, is I'll say, would you be interested in giving me some quality of mercy?
We all need it. We all need it.
And so no matter what it is, whether I like you, I don't like you, whether you like me, you don't like me, is that are we willing to give each other some quality of mercy? We don't always have to be together. We never have to be together. But in that whatever instance it is, if I can give people that quality of mercy and they give it to me, I am okay with that. And if I can do something where you can do what you need to do, I haven't gotten in your way, and I haven't agitated you, it's fine. But you also give me some quality of mercy of, give me a couple of minutes to take something out of the shelf before, you come in there and say, I'm sneaking through.
Mm.
Have a little patience.
Yes, yes. No, I love that answer, and what it reminded me of is what Robert Williams said, and the irony is obviously how he departed this earth, but he used to say that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So
That's
be
right.
kind,
That's
be
right.
kind always.
Yeah.
And it I've heard The Rock say it. I've heard so many people say this expression too, that it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice
Yeah.
and to be a pleasant, kind human. And sometimes that's all the medicine someone needs.
You have to learn how to be nice or what nice. I mean, just because you say, well, I'm a nice person,
Mm,
but your behavior isn't pleasant, then you are not a nice person. You are a selfish person,
amen.
and you are a person that doesn't get the plot of, what you say to people. And then somebody they'll say, well, you can't talk about it that way. I mean, this is our culture these days. We have people are yelling at each other. People are talking,
Yes.
but they're not. They're talking, but they're not listening. And if you want an example, look on Facebook or YouTube of interviews 30, 40 years ago, how they had a interview and a conversation than they do in 2026, how we're having a conversation of interrupting each other, yelling at each other, insulting each other. Gee, insulting me. Gee, I'm gonna feel a whole lot better about myself, and my dignity is gonna be really enhanced because you've been so insulting.
Yeah, no, so I mean, it's just I was talking to these children yesterday at elementary school, and it's just like playground rules 101 for life. Be kind, be considerate, and don't be a mean person. Like just don't be mean.
But
And if somebody
well,
deserves
see,
you that,
stop.
go ahead.
It isn't. What does mean unless somebody knows what it is? I mean,
That's a good point.
are tools. These are behavior things. What does it mean to be cooperative? How do you cooperate? What does cooperation mean? What is teamwork? What is a team? What does a team do? And so
Yes.
it isn't just that you say the words, it's applying the music of, I got to teach you, and it all often goes to sport because it's the greatest understanding of meaning is that sports, it's teamwork, it's cooperate, but you have to learn how to do things. You have to learn how to catch a ball. Well, how do you catch a ball? What does that mean?
What's a drop? What's that mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
and the rules to the sport, behavior, and so it's not that simple to say I play a sport. Is that you're playing an activity which has a lot of elements to it. But look, there are things in sports where if you're in football, if you're hitting the other person, you have that thing of meanness. Well, then that means meanness is tolerated in that situation.
You're
Or
right.
aggressive.
You're right.
But you can't be that in every situation. I mean, you want the alternative of football, meanness and aggressiveness. You can't do that in golf. They will either eliminate you or they will fine you if you have that kind of if you. There was one of the golfers in the Masters that was upset and hit the tee. He got frustrated, hit the tee, he was fined or he was admonished. So depending on the sport and depending on activity, that's what's expected. But you got to know. I guess where I'm going with this is you got to know the difference, and you got to learn how to handle your emotions. But look, sometimes it's behavior. You just get upset. You just get
Yeah.
frustrated.
Yeah.
You throw the ball, you throw the club, say something to somebody, but then when you come to your, when you calm down, and that's also something you learn to negotiate. Never say to somebody, "Calm down."
Oh, yeah.
That's putting.
Don't say it in a marriage. Definitely don't say it in a marriage.
I mean, this is where it says you're real. It seems like you're really upset with me, and perhaps when we'll talk about it later. But right now, all we're going to do is throw kerosene and nitroglycerin at each other. It's the worst time to have the conversation. Or if somebody is berating me, I'll just be. I've learned how to just be quiet. Berate me. Do what you want to do with me. But if I have a comment, they don't want to listen to anything. They want to say what they want to say. So it's much easier just to be quiet.
You're right. No, you're so right. I'm telling you, I'm taking notes, so many notes. And what I love is the term you said, tactical empathy. That was so brilliant. And I'm going to
That's not me.
definitely,
That's actually Chris Voss. He wrote a book, maybe you read it, called "Never Split the Difference."
Chris Foss.
Yeah,
All
Chris
right.
Voss, Never Split the Difference. But he has a company now, the Black Swan Group. And I told him in an interview I was with, I told him I'm a Swanee. And he actually took it rather well. But the term is a Black Swan is something significant that you've learned about a person or a situation that it's called the golden nugget. Something that really is telling about now, Chris's background is he was a FBI hostage negotiator, and that's where he learned all his skills about negotiating. And then when he retired from the FBI, then he and his son started this company called the Black Swan Group. So they teach in person and online and in books negotiating techniques, which I wish I had learned 50 years ago.
Yeah, that's really that's profound. I just wrote that down because I'm gonna definitely share it in the notes of where somebody else can learn these things too. And what I really love is what you said about the communication and expectations and knowing the rules to whatever proverbial game we're doing and we're engaging in, because that's a perfect analogy that you can tackle and you can block and you can extend your arms, and that's a legal play in football, but go ahead and do that when you're playing basketball. That's called that's a foul, that's a penalty, right? So we need to know that, and I think we assume so much. And I'd like to read Don Miguel Ruiz's book about the 4 agreements, but he says in there one of the 4 agreements is don't make assumptions, and don't make assumptions just to what you alluded to with your background and then coming to boot camp and then meeting everyone else. What is normal? That's such an abstract term because your normal is different than my normal, and we continue to do what we think is normal, but just because you're doing it what is normal doesn't mean we're doing it right or what is best for everyone in the situation. We're just creatures of habit and continuing to do it because there's been no other input of experience or information or communication to tell us otherwise. So why are people difficult? Because they're allowed to be. And whatever the situation is, so you need to inform them. Like Connie Podesta, she made that term. She said in one of her speeches, she said, she's one of my mentors. Connie Podesta, she's one of my One of my favorite mentors, she's a comedian and a motivational speaker, but she said one time, she said, why are people difficult? She asked the audience and everybody comes up with reasons or whatever. She said, because they're allowed to be and it works for them. And until we call them out or hold them accountable, they're going to keep doing because that behavior works for them. So it could be said for the same with the difficult person, or maybe you're the difficult person, but until somebody has the courage to bring it to your attention, you just don't know. So you're going to keep doing it because it works.
Exactly. And two other things. I mean, my wife does this too with me. She'll say, you're going to have to, modify or reorient your behavior. It's very blunt about it. But it, even if you have, behavior issues, you can read books about it, but you got to practice it. And I'm going to talk about, when emergency services or military or special, whatever it is, your skill level, you need constant continuing education. I mean, a simple thing, I go on vacation, I come back, I can't remember my passwords.
Yeah.
I'm just not in the habit, I'm not in the practice of, I mean, I'll get back into it. But the point is that if you want to learn how to change or you want to get better at something, you got to practice at it all the time, every day.
Yes.
If you have relationships issues, you got to practice it every day. You don't just do it every once in a while or when you feel like it or you're in a good mood. When things are not going well, that you practice it. Smile, get up, do some, say something. I do this almost every day when I'm out doing something. Somebody will say, "How are you?" I love that. "How are you?" And I'll say, "Great." And want to know why? Because you're here. And nobody ever says that.
That's
It says,
true.
I'm feeling good because you're here. And then if they say, well, why is that? It says, because if you weren't here, then I would be here being annoyed because I couldn't get something accomplished or the items aren't here. So if all of you are here that have what it is I want, and then you're helping, I'm very happy you're here. So I just want to acknowledge, I'm really happy you're here. So, anyway, and oftentimes they'll say, thank you. I haven't heard that. Or it just makes them feel better because most of the times is, how you doing? Fine. Looks like you have a lot of groceries. Looks like, but anyway, those are the things that I do because it helps them to help me to help, the situation. I mean, it's redundancy. You go into a restaurant, servers, we're working hard. And so,
Yes.
I come in, hi, how are you? I'm really happy. I'm really happy you're here. What are they going to do? Be mad at me because I said, I'm happy you're here. I'm happy that I don't feel invisible and I get attention. I like that. And they're more likely to approach me or come around if I'm pleasant than if I'm just saying, you're the help. And I also say this, with people for caregiving, is that if you don't know how to accept caregiving, then you're going to have to learn how.
Mhm.
Because if you're a curmudgeon or you're not sure how to accept help, then you need to learn how. People will help you. They will do things, but they won't be as kind about it, or they might be perfunctory. But when you're not feeling well, or you have whatever issues you may have, I always like when people are kind to me.
Yes. Yes. No, it works. It works. And it's funny you said it because I was going to be like, and look at you leading by example, because in that moment of saying, I'm great because you're here, that's making someone feel like they matter. And that's definitely making somebody feel like they're not invisible, or that they're not invisible. They're visible and they matter. And that's sometimes all people need, is just to feel like they matter.
That's it. That's right.
I love it. I love it. I've learned so much. I'm telling you, I have 2 pages of notes, and I think the rest of the world is going to benefit a lot from you sharing your insight, your experience. And you are welcome back on this show anytime, Mr. Raymond. I just got to tell you, thank you. Thank you for your service, sincerely, for all of your service and what you do today. And then just being a cool human. Like, I know that's real abstract, but you are a cool man. And I just thank you.
If you're ever in the other Washington, you're in the D.C. area, but if you're ever in the other Washington state, come visit us. You're invited.
Well, I would love to, sir. And the
Bring
same to you if you ever run.
whomever you want, the family.
Thank you.
You're invited to bring others besides yourself.
I appreciate you, Raymond. Thank you. Thank you for being a kind human, because everybody, kindness matters, and being a decent human, it matters. So I just thank you for being kind, decent, and a good human and unselfish. A humble warrior, y'all. Thank you, Raymond, for being on the show with us today. And thank you all for listening. This has been the episode 81. I wish we'd have done 82 for your 82nd, but it's the 81st.
I'll tell you what, I was also with the 1/3 of Vietnam. So when you're at the 1/3, you can have me back.
There it is. There it is. I love it. Hey, everybody, thank y'all for listening. Please take care of each other. It's okay not to be okay, but please don't stay that way. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. We got to deal with our mess, or it's going to deal with us. And if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, no. She said change your attitude. Much love to you all. Thank you for listening, and please make good choices. Brick by brick, they all matter. Much love, world.